Good morning. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good morning.
Good, good.
So
I'm good. I think Paul might be backstage. Here it comes. Paul Tobis.
Hi, Paul. Good morning.
good
So-
morning.
Right out from the backstage.
Well,
That's a great conversation you guys were having previously. It's some interesting stuff those guys are working on.
Oh, we've got, you have no idea the contacts that we have made with IBM TV from all over the world. It's been so fabulous that people keep coming back. The dean from Yale comes back every week. David K. Johnson, who's a Pulitzer Prize author and tax expert, literally has an hour every week that he comes in. Doctors from Harvard. I mean, doctors from India have been coming almost every day for months, sharing what's been going on. So this has been a fabulous experience and journey to start IBM TV World News. So
Yeah, well, I'm getting a test tomorrow actually, so I'll have to let you know how that goes. I'm not sure what type it's going to be, but I was traveling last week, so they have free testing facilities where I live, and I figured, you know what, why not? Just go in, get it taken care of, and get the check. So I'll have to give you an update on that.
absolutely, Scott. So did you have to schedule an appointment and how long and things like that?
Yeah, I did. You know, at CBS, they have a website. You go on, and they give you a list of times that you can check in, and you schedule an appointment. You drive up. You got to tell them what type of car you drive, what color it is, and everything, because you're not allowed to get out of your car. They come right up to your window, and they do the test right there.
Wow. So, drive-through has definitely updated a little bit from picking up food to getting tests. This is pretty interesting. I love CVS. CVS won my heart many years ago when they quit selling cigarettes.
Yeah.
Because they said, you know what, it's just not healthy. We're going to stop it. And they knew, their board member said, if you do that, we're going to go under because we're going to lose so much business. And in fact, they didn't go under. They actually probably picked up more business. So, but Scott, welcome. Just for everybody to know and our viewers to know, our board members here, we have Willie Hill from Australia. He's also an entrepreneur. And we have Rakesh from Hong Kong. These guys have been faithful to IBM TV since we started. And they've been on our show almost every day, sharing the world news from their end of the world. We also have Ann Kitt, who is our senior executive producer. And Nick Palavati, I don't know if he beamed out. We beam in and out of here. It's a great way to be able to air TV shows all day cost effectively. So anyway, and Paul, welcome as well. Share with me who you are. I'm glad to meet you.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, Kimberly, Willie, Rakesh, and Keith, thank you for having us on. It's great to meet you guys. Given the list of your previous guests, going to be hard shoes to fill. Pulitzer Prize winners, doctors, Yale professors. I am an astronaut and a pilot and a rock star, so hopefully that fills the void.
Oh my gosh! So
yeah, I wish.
Let me tell you something. Every day we meet people that are just astounding because you do something really fabulous in the technical world that not many people have been able to achieve. And that's my background in 40 years of engineering is telecom engineering, connecting the world via communications. But share with us what you do for the company,
Sure.
you are, how it got started, and all of these wonderful things.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll kind of go back and forth, but I'll go ahead and kick us off. So I'm the Vice President of Sales at American Firewire, been in the wireless industry for coming up on 16 years now. And, wireless people get very confused. What does wireless mean? Well, the wireless industry that I speak of is really the infrastructure of everything wireless, whether it's Wi-Fi in a hotel, whether it is providing connectivity to rural areas, or public safety and first responders, which is where our company was born out of. So we started about 4 years ago, and just a little bit of background on the specific industry that we're in. It's called public safety for first responders, where we provide coverage inside buildings for first responders. So if, unfortunately, if you remember back to 9/11, there was a lot of problems with the ability to communicate outside of the building, similar to not having a cell signal in your office or in your home. And so we're in the industry of making sure that there is coverage for the first responders, police, fire, ambulance, whomever, inside a building during an emergency. So we started about 4 years ago by a vision of our president, who couldn't make it today, Will Rogers. You'll have to excuse, you might hear the dog in the background protecting me.
That's okay.
But anyway, so about 4 years ago, Will had a vision to create this cable called, it's 2-hour fire-rated cable. Within a system that brings the connectivity or the communications inside a building, it's a system of antennas, cabling, and amplifiers, where you take the signal from the outside and bring it to the inside. Within that system, there are requirements and regulations that the cable can burn for up to 2 hours, or matching the building's survivability. This did not exist at the time, so it was very expensive for companies and ultimately for building owners to pay to fireproof this cable, because if the cable burns, the rest of the system doesn't work.
Right.
So there was a need, there was a demand, there was no product. So we had a vision on building this product, and after roughly 4 years of engineering, generation 1, generation 2, now generation 3, we finally have a cable that can burn for over 2 hours at up to 1850 degrees and pass the radio frequency signal, and ensuring communications for our first responders and ultimately saving lives.
Wow. So I want
that's wonderful.
So the thing people don't understand, we claim ourselves to be a wireless world when in fact there's a lot of wire that backhauls everything. I mean, people just don't understand the capacity of wires that are still involved in a wireless society. But let's talk about your first responder projects, which I know it as FirstNet, correct? Are you?
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm familiar with FirstNet. That is a type of system that's coming online that's being used by AT&T and more of the cellular networks, but it's a slightly different frequency than generally what's being currently used today.
Right, but there's a combination.
Absolutely.
And the combination that we are talking about and working with, and one of the things that makes you unique is your ability to withstand the heat and fire for the length of time. I mean, that is a very rare capability. And even fiber itself cannot withstand that kind of heat. So that's fabulous. I think, you know what, I'm going back. I'm always going back because I know I've met Scott somewhere. I do know how we kind of crossed paths again. Yep. It was by accident. I thought he was one of my attorneys, and the conversation just went from one craziness to another.
He stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, so I think he might be an attorney.
Well, what's weird, Scott? Every time your name pops up on my phone now, I think you're my attorney. So,
don't come to me for legal advice.
Yeah, right. But I'll tell you what, I will come to you for technology advice. Well, I also, I'm not just a TV show host. I'm an engineer for 40 years and launching an invention, working with FirstNet and with law enforcement, but also inside of buildings, and where you talk about being able to track what's going on inside of a building. That's part of my patent, is to be able to track, identify, give alerts, and also document, right, everything that went on, because data is very important, but what's more important is how you use it. And so I've worked on this since 2012, and part of my going in and solving the Z-axis problem, which has always been a big issue, was work I was doing with one of the directors of Homeland Security, who asked me if I could help them do tracking inside of airports, because he lost a friend who was killed in a shootout in one of the airports, and they couldn't find him. He bled out before they could find him. So one of the things he wanted to do was be able to, be able to track just your own employees, right? Not even to track for other nonsense stuff that's going on, but start from the very important part of where's my own people and how can I reach them and help them. But what you're doing is pretty phenomenal. How's business going this year?
Well, we just launched about a month and a half ago.
Wow. Okay.
So Scott, why don't you go ahead and take that?
Well, the interesting thing about it is we have been at this for about 4 years now, trying to put together a product that will meet all the requirements, can be mass produced, and there's been a lot of interest from the industry because when you look at the more antiquated options that people used to be able to work with versus ours, we're at about a tenth of the price as opposed to the materials, the labor, everything that went into what was previously involved with the other option. So there's been a lot of people following us over the last 4 years, seeing the progress that we're having. And we launched, just about a month and a half ago. And right when we launched, there's 200, 300 people just in the area that I service, which is primarily the Northeast, that cannot wait to work with our products. So It's been pretty exciting. And, that 2 hour mark, you mentioned that earlier, why that was important. And I just want to elaborate on that. So these systems, they are intended to keep running for 2 hours. And the most crucial and the most commonly used would be fire in that scenario. So what they figure is for fire, 2 hours, if they haven't solved the problem within 2 hours, then they're evacuating the building. Yep. But within those 2 hours, it is absolutely crucial for them to be able to have communication inside of the building. And as Paul was saying, previously that signal, it gets lost between what we typically build buildings with: concrete, steel, wood. All this stuff will block the RF frequency from getting inside of the building. So now we have the system that redistributes the signal throughout the building. These guys can communicate, they can coordinate life-saving activities. It's safer for the firefighters, the SWAT teams, the police, everybody that goes in the building, but it's also safer for whoever lives in those buildings, whoever works in those buildings, and it's a crucial thing. But to go back to what I was saying earlier about the price being such a drastic thing, it was very hard for a lot of buildings to be able to afford the cost previously. And some jurisdictions, they weren't enforcing it as strictly as they could. Every jurisdiction gets to decide exactly what they do. Being able to complete these projects at a more reasonable dollar amount is going to give people the opportunity to be actually able to complete these projects, whereas previously it was, well, we can do this project or we can and go out of business, or we could not do the project, and there was that disconnect. So now with the ability of this cable and the margins that are so drastically different, people are really going to be able to complete these projects in a timely manner like they should. Authority having jurisdictions will be able to enforce it and say, okay, it's no longer a $3 million project, it's a $300,000 project. There's no reason you can't do this. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, and let's talk about some of the benefits that might come along with it. Maybe reduced insurance costs because you've implemented some really good safety procedures. But also, I'm looking at your future sales and ability to go and rebuild some of the buildings that were burned in fires during the protest or the riot. These weren't the take that back. Not during the protests, during the riots. Yeah. We have to be careful. So, but the thing is that there was a lot of damage, and now you have to go in and maybe reinstalling better cable and this particular standard it's a good time to take advantage of this when you're rebuilding. But new construction, what about for houses? Would this be something that would be good for residential?
Yeah, it's required for large residential. You go through a neighborhood, single family homes, you wouldn't typically have this, but some jurisdictions, for instance, any building more than 3 stories are required to have this. One thing that, I'm glad you distinguished the rioters versus the protesters. I completely agree there. But with the riots, you look at that church that was burned down in DC, and one of the things that previously with the other models that hasn't been discussed up to this point is the footprint of the other options. With that wrap, you're looking at something that can be, you know, this wide, 3 feet to cover those materials, those cables previously, whereas our cable is a standalone cable and it has a much smaller footprint. So when you look at a historical building, you don't want to see a big 3-foot enclosure that runs the length of the building. This is a much smaller footprint. It can be painted and can more disguise itself in those buildings. So that's one of the big areas that people are noticing. And you'd also mentioned the, you know, with the structures that have had issues, that is one of the big times that the existing structures will begin to implement these systems, is because the firefighters go in, they try to use their communications devices, and that's when they will realize that their communications devices are faulty, they're not working inside of the building, and that's when it gets reported. At that level, that's when they'll go to the building and say, you have to implement one of these systems.
Oh, no,
Kimberly, if I can jump in real quick to your point earlier about the, you know, some of the buildings that have burned down during the riots. You know, this system is not an investment for a building owner where they get an ROI. It's a sunk cost and a requirement, right? They have to do it to open up and get their building permit. So any possible way to lower the cost of the overall system is you know, more than welcome in the marketplace. And with all the buildings that will have to be rebuilt, they will absolutely have to put in a public safety DAS. That DAS stands for Distributed Antenna System. They will have to put it in, and with our cable now being on the market, they'll be able to do it at a significantly less cost. So that'll be a benefit. And to your previous question, you know, business has been very good so far. A lot of these are project driven. Well, they're all project driven. So it's not something that someone just goes to the store and picks up because it's a new product, right? There's a lot of steps to the projects until it ultimately gets purchased and installed. So we're kind of in that project mode and filling our funnel, and but the acceptance and the excitement in the marketplace is beyond what we thought.
Well, you know, this is our business day, so let's talk a little bit about building a business, because we try to encourage startups, and this is definitely what I consider a startup with a lot of experience, right? Not many people have the experience that you guys have. It, so this is great. But let's talk about, you know, how long did it take you to establish this? What kind of standards did you have to meet? Who did you meet with to get these standards? Is the fire department, do you have certain fire department levels? Did you go to DC? Like in DC, we have smart cities, and there some of the fire department commissioners attend to give us standards. So what all was involved in building you where you are today?
It's a great question. So there's a lot of standards. There's different types of tests that need to be done that you have to pass, right? So within our UL is one of the main standard bearers that you have to pass a certain test, or you have to do something that is an equivalent. So one of the I'd just say challenges is that when you invent a brand new product, there's not a standard necessarily to address that product. And we invented this cable. So there is no specific standard to test to our cable as there would be to, say, a fire alarm system where it's been on the market for, 50 years. And there's just there's a standard built around how a fire alarm should work, or how an elevator should work, all those things. So it's a brand new product. So there has been a little bit of a hurdle with finding standards that test our product to be used as it's intended to be used, burning for 2 hours and passing the radio frequency. So we've had to work with a separate company that allowed us to test to both standards. And now it's a matter of basically telling that story, evangelizing it to what Scott said earlier, the authorities having jurisdiction, or the fire marshals, because there's different levels in every jurisdiction, for them to sign off on your product and say, okay, this looks like it works. I'm on board with your testing procedures. So you may now be installed in this system. So there's been a lot of there's more tests that we need to take and to pay for. It's not cheap to pay for these tests at all, like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I try to explain that to investors. Not just take something off the shelf, and I'm like, no.
It has to be tested.
It has to be, can you not know? And one of the biggest mistakes, I'll share a story with you. There was somebody came out with a tracking device several years ago. And that they managed to get funding. They said, all we needed is XYZ, $150,000. I'm like, who the heck would have taken that task on? Only $150,000. It costs more than that just for engineering fees. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm sitting here, and the sad part of the story was they got the product built and got it launched, but then somebody came back and said, you didn't get your certifications for GPS and the little one that goes between the skin and the product, and they didn't get any of it. So that's what I do when I build my business plan, because of my background in engineering, and I helped launch the first fiber networks, and I did the product buildments for business packages for all of these things. I know the little, like you said, UL approved.
The nuances.
Right. There are GPS certifications. There are wireless certifications. There are antenna certifications. There's so many certifications and licenses you have to get. It's unbelievable. And it would cost more than $150,000 for one. And so I'm glad you brought this up, because this company, they didn't do it. They had to go back and restart, and it was a $3 million restart.
Yep. It's and there's a lot of education.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a lot of education that needs to be made, because if there isn't a standard for your product, either a standard has to be created, or you work with another standards and testing company to potentially alter a test. So what we did is we went to a company called Western Fire. There is a test called ASTM E119 that's used to test for building survivability.
Okay.
But it's more based on building materials, but still uses the same, what's called a time temperature curve or burn test. They allowed us to inject the RF signal and certify that we passed it for the entirety of the 2 hours. So we have been tested to a standard that was, they allowed us to alter just slightly. But there's a lot of education to be done in the marketplace, specifically with the authorities having jurisdiction and the building code enforcers, for lack of a better term,
Right.
until UL comes out with a standard that's specific to our cable, because they don't just write standards for anybody that opens up creates a new product.
Yeah, but
No,
at the risk of stating the obvious, aren't you describing a barrier to innovation?
Absolutely, 100%.
But
that's a very poignant way of putting it, because
if you don't do some barriers, you end up with a mess like we have with the internet right now. Because now the internet, they didn't put a lot of barriers and standards in place, and now we have a lot of open doors for hackers. And it created a mess, and they know they did. They realized this, but their choice was, if we regulate it too much, then we're not going to have a lot of innovation. So they waited, and they said, you know what, let's just open it up and see what happens. And it became a mess. It became such a big mess, especially with PCI compliances, that a lot of universities and hospitals were hacked so often that they've gone back to virtual private networks. So majority of them have gone back and reconfigured their whole infrastructure, and they have no more outside interconnectivity to their systems and mainframes. So, yeah.
It's a fine line between overregulation and underregulation. You got to protect, in ours, you have to protect people. You can't just have any, a fire alarm. I keep going back to that because that's the most common product that someone just makes in the garage and throw it in a building. But then again, you don't want to inhibit innovation. So it's a very fine line between too much and too little regulation. And we're learning this. Your example before, an extra $3 million, it's not that high with us, but there's certainly some more hurdles than we had originally anticipated.
Right. And a lot of people don't. And I think it was my background, because a lot of investors would not invest in me. They invested in the cheap guys. And it was because I had all of that in place. They go, you're just doing too much. You're doing, no. If you don't do this, you're going to go back to the drawing board and you're going to start over. For them, it was $3 million because they had to redo all of their engineering fees. They had to redo everything. It wasn't $3 million just for the licenses, but in order to get approved. But I want to add something, that all of these regulations, as much as they might hinder some innovation, they actually secure your intellectual property when you do pass them, right?
Yes.
So it kind of gives you a little bit of certification, and it gives you a little bit of what I call profitability and credibility. So now you can go out and sell with a little bit of credibility, and it makes it easier to sell. So there's a plus and minus to all of this.
But Kimberly, I have to ask, who's, again, stating the obvious, who's regulating the regulators? And I don't understand how we're going to meet that fine line between overregulation and underregulation unless someone's doing it in an intelligent fashion. Because I don't think we're overregulated. I think we're insanely regulated because it's not logical.
You're right. There is no, so like Smart Cities has National Institute of Standard Technologies that promotes smart cities. And the reason why NIST was chosen was as they've set the standards globally for a lot of technology that is used today. Like they were the ones who established what red light, green light, yellow light means. Otherwise, every country would be different. You'd have no idea when to slow down, stop, or go. So there are a few organizations that exist. Sometimes you get these standards, like he was saying, that this technology has never existed before, so you have to establish the standards. Like that's why I sat on the standards committees for fiber. Standards for fiber never existed before. Right. So we had to build and establish what those standards are, what the tests are, and then you're going to have people come in and they're going to dispute it and just say no, it needs to be this, but that's science, and that's going to happen. But it is insanely regulated. I'm not too crazy with some of the ways that they regulate things, because sometimes it's about this. PCI compliance is a big example. Because when I ask them, when they come in and they find companies anywhere in the world for not following a certain standard in PCI, I ask, where does that money go? Who's getting that money? Who's fining and who's getting the money? And to top it off, what's the money being used for? And nobody can answer my question at these big standards committee meetings. So it is just like what I discovered many years ago when I started my own phone company, that the FCC fee that everybody was being billed had nothing to do with federal commissions. And nothing, that money the FCC never even saw the money. FCC fee was done by all the major corporations. The money came in. It was it went up as high as $7 per month for each residential client. And that money went as bonuses to the owners of the company. Okay. I was the one who founded that problem. I was the one who addressed it and got it removed from the books because I thought it was wrong and I was not going to do it for my company. So I did, I actually, when I went back, that was the first time I ever got audited by my taxes too. So I pissed somebody.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I really pissed somebody off back then. But,
I bet.
But what I want to say is that, nobody really manages all the regulations. UL has been around the longest. Am I right? UL. So that's the
over 100 years, I believe.
That's the first one. In any kind of technology with power associated in any way that connects to the utility, you have to get UL approved. And that's hard. It's not easy. It is a big check, but
Yeah, well, especially when they don't have a certification. So UL has something that's similar. They have a test for electrical cables or data cables. And what they do is you send this cable to a fire room. And that fire room, it has the heat signature time heat interval that Paul was mentioning earlier. And that gets up to 1850 degrees. It runs for 2 hours. But what they do is they have this cable going through it. It's like a kiln that you would use in shop class to make a pot. It's the exact same idea, except for this one you can drive a bus into. So you have the cable going through it, and on the far end you have a light bulb. And that light bulb has to stay lit the entire test for the 2 hours. And that's how they certify that this cable is able to function for 2 hours under the heat time test interval. Well, we're obviously not an electrical cable. We run RF radio frequency through it. So that testing facility that Paul mentioned, we went to them and we said, okay, here's the test to get this UL rating. It's the most similar that we can see on the UL, but we're not an electrical cable. We don't want to blur the lines and make people think that we are, doing something that we're not. So we have this device right here, and it measures RF frequency. To be up to code, you have to be at a very minimum at this level right here. And what we'd like to certify is, as opposed to having the light bulb, we want to have this device metering the RF, and we want to certify that under the exact same heat and time test interval that you would do for UL, that we are able to reach the minimums for RF frequency. So that's how, with UL not having a direct test for RF frequency, because it's a new technology, that's how we were able to still get our 2 hour fire rating.
Wow. So let me ask you this. Have you guys made a contact?
I'm sorry, I missed that one, Kimberly.
Why are we echoing?
There you go. That's
All
better.
Right. Okay. So there's an organization in North Carolina called Micro Center of North Carolina, MCNC, Microcomputers of North Carolina. They're the ones who helped us establish credibility and standards for fiber. And I was wondering if you guys have made any contact with them.
No, we haven't. I'm not familiar with that. I'd love to get the information.
Yeah, let's do that, because they set a lot of standards that are used globally. And I just had a friend of mine leave a government job to go work for them. And so let's see what we can do. A lot of companies, especially when it comes to cabling and the communication world, they always kind of go there to just get that extra certification.
That would be excellent. I want to make just a couple more quick comments. Jim, I like what you said. It's not necessarily over-regulation. It's insane regulation. And who's regulating the regulators? And what we've seen is it's kind of a Wild West in certain ways, in that, certain jurisdictions want us to pass a test that has nothing to do with our cable. It's just a box they want to check. Yeah. And he said, well, but this doesn't say anything about, it says our cable's round, or you can step on it. What does this have to do with our cable? And so it's pretty insane when you really dig into the nuances of regulations and educating, regulating the regulators, or educating the regulators is really, one of the biggest things that we do all day, every day. And many of them are open to this education. A lot of them just want to check a box. And so certainly, to your point, Tim, it is a barrier to innovation at some level. But to your point, Kimberly, is if you know this and you get over those early on, then, all your hard work, it does have some level of protection.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Let's talk about the future, scalable models, what you're doing to, just ensure your sustainability. You got to generate sales. That's what you guys are out there doing. Congratulations on launching like that. But what do you need moving forward as a startup type business?
Well, certainly it's a brand new product, so adoption, right? And the more people adopt, the more the snowball effect goes. Okay. Oh, you use it, okay, now I can use it. So early adoption is one key, but we're not that concerned about this happening, because the need and the demand is there. It's funny that you don't really have to sell this cable that strongly to the integrators and the contractors, because they just see the need. Oh, you guys are finally here, so there's not a lot of sales if you're talking to the right person. Right. It's not like a matter of convincing someone they need a product that they didn't know that they needed. But getting past the regulatory part, but moving forward, we do have a product roadmap. I can't obviously go into all the details of it here. It's going to be surrounded by this industry, of protecting the system. because we can't be a one-trick pony and just have one product. We do have other products under development, and you brought up the fiber cable. Obviously, that there's a huge need for fire-rated fiber that is UL listed as well, and so we definitely have a robust product roadmap, and hopefully these will be coming online within the next year plus.
Well, that's exciting. So you need adoption. You probably need awareness. You just need
adoption, some awareness, money, of course.
So let's talk about, everybody says they need money. Are you looking for investors?
We're privately funded at the moment, but for the right investor, obviously we're going to sit down and talk to anybody that's interested in investing with us. Auntie, you're in? I saw you raise your hand.
So we're all entrepreneurs.
I just wanted to offer you a bigger market, which is India. We have 1.3 billion people, and there is a lot of good wire requirement every time. I mean, because we are still in the building state. I mean, if you compare America, it's already have a good infrastructure, but we are still developing a lot of infrastructure. So I think American fire would be a good option for Indian. But what I would like to understand is that why you opted for the name American Fire, and do you see yourself outside US as well as a market for your company? And how big is the industry right now?
How big is the industry? And did you ask about where we came up with American Firewire?
Well, he's wondering if you want to go beyond America.
So, oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I forgot to mention in the beginning, we are 100% American made, which is great for the American market, thus our name, American Firewire. We want to sell worldwide, obviously. It all depends on what country is enforcing which type of building code. I know that there's certain pockets of Canada that are enforcing it, similar to we are. Doesn't look like there's a lot of enforcement in Mexico currently. But frankly, we need to do some more research into all the countries that are enforcing a similar code around a system that is fire rated. So absolutely, we want to scale up.
How big is the current market right now?
Go ahead.
How big is the current market?
How big
is the market?
Currently.
It's a tough question to answer because if you're talking about the size of the market for all products, it's certainly in the U.S. It's probably around 5-6 billion, I think, is the last figure that I saw. But there's a lot of different products that go into that. There's labor that goes into that. So the market for our specific cable, about a year and a half ago, because I'll just take a quick step back. The cable that we're replacing cost about $1.50 a foot. Our cable right now is $55, $65 list per foot. But the alternative could be $500 a foot to fireproof it. So if you're looking at the market from the $1.50 a foot, that's one figure. So it's kind of hard to pin down. But we've had estimates of $50 to $100 million at a minimum for just the cable in the U.S.
Wow.
Yeah, that's that wrap we were talking about, because the cable that runs inside of it that previously wasn't fireproofed, $1.50 a foot. But by the time you do all the fireproofing, it can be $500, $600, even more a foot with materials and labor.
Wow. That's
and also, Paul, is the cable only used for?
We're echoing.
Yeah.
Let
me just fix it. So, Paul, so you mentioned that your bigger market is about construction industry, but do you have a specific wire for underwater as well? Do you have anything specific product for underwater?
Well, I know we don't have fire-rated cable for underwater. I'm just kidding. No, I've never really explored the underwater cabling market.
Would you be talking about maybe cruise ships?
No, I'm not about cruise ships, basically. So what happened is that because I was listening to the conversation, but if you know about the data server market, they required a lot of wiring as well, and most of the data server requires a lot of electric consumption because they need cooling thermometers or the cooling equipments basically to make sure that the server remains cool. So now what they're doing a testing is that they're putting all the servers under a sea or an ocean, and that requires a lot of wiring. And the testing is already done, and they are happy with the testing. But now they are working on the model where they can plant those servers underwater and how they can utilize it. Because if they put underwater, the server cost remains 25%.
Really?
Yeah.
So so just out of the keen, because you're talking about fire, so why not water?
I would love to pick up this conversation after this and learn more about that market itself. I mean, I think we have a lot of things to.
The world's largest data center in Miami, right? And it's underwater, and whenever they have floods, but they also make the connectivity across the oceans. So yeah, definitely the water corrosion. I want to share with you one of my biggest success stories as an entrepreneur raising money. And a lot of people don't realize how important cable still is in investing in. Everybody thinks it's all this, right? It
all plugs into a cable.
Nobody has any idea. So when talking with someone who invests a lot of money into a lot of big projects, he generally would never invest in telecom because it had a right. So I asked one question. It's just purely because of my background, right? And I'm going to share that here. I always tell people you have to read my book to find out what that question is. But I asked one question because he said, I'm going to give you 7 minutes to pitch me your company. And I'm like, I didn't come here to pitch my company. I came here to pitch somebody else's, which went well. But I know that you don't invest in telecom. So I didn't. And he goes, no, 7 minutes. You got it. So I just looked at him and I said, okay, I have one question to ask you. What is the one thing that has been invested in the past 100 years or more that never lost its value? Ever.
And the answer?
He didn't have an answer, nor did his attorney. And he finally asked me, well, what is it? And I said, it's the cable in the ground and the right of ways. All the cable that you have never lost its value, ever. Landlines in particular, the copper, cable itself will corrode. So I don't like to invest in it. You'll never see any of my projects with cable. I thought Time Warner was a never mind. So
we are talking about the wireless world, but for the wireless world also we require a lot of cabling to be done at good quality with at the right time, because those cables will create a lot of wireless for our day-to-day usage. And I think because of 5G, which is just around the corner, we need good cables which sustain for a long period of time. And with that, I have a question for Paul and Scott. Have you ever thought about creating some kind of analytics with your cable, that what kind of instructions or messages those cables are sharing, and then that could be a dashboard for you to make sure that when is the time to change the cable, or what is the time to repair it and things like that. Have you ever thought about anything like that?
The data for the applications, you mean, Kit?
Yeah, maybe a bot for the cable which will tell us that now it's time to repair and how much time we have put in the cable. So there are a lot of data involved basically. So based on that data, we can make sure that we can do good services for our clients.
Well, I would love to. And as far as gathering and monitoring data that might pass to our cable, is that part of your question?
I thought so.
So it's more about, suppose you put up a cable in my office 10 years ago. So now, what is the status of that cable? How soon we have to change it? What is the repair point of view?
Got it.
How is it performing? Is it performing 100% or is it performing 80%? So there are a lot of insights and data which we can create, which will help us to create more, recurring business for our clients.
Oh my gosh, that is excellent. I mean, how many people actually do that? That's
so no, that's a great point. And as far as these systems are involved, you have your antennas, your cable, your bidirectional amplifiers, and usually the integrator will have a maintenance contract that they come out and test every year to make sure it's working. The cabling, as far as its life cycle, monitoring its life cycle, and then recommending when to replace it, though, I haven't really seen that as a specific market itself. Usually, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, they replace it. But having a life cycle that you say, look, probably time to replace your cable because you certainly don't want it going out at the worst time.
That is brilliant.
It's a great idea.
But Paul, you need to understand that we are talking about the digital era. Maybe something else is coming up now. But we have cards which can tell us that it's time to do service. So same as with system, same as with antivirus. So there should be some kind of a model which we can create out of that electricity industry, especially the cable, which will help us to create more sales and also help us to reduce a lot of fire as well, basically. Because a lot of fire around the world happens. I don't have a data, but I think 25-30% fire happens just because of the faulty cable.
Yes.
So I think. So I think there could some kind of innovation could come out that point of time. Yeah.
I was going to share with you real quick, Enki. So that device that I was talking about earlier that monitors the RF frequency, that's the same device that is required on an annual basis with these systems. You actually have to go through, you split the building up into different zones, and you test to make sure that each zone of that building is reaching at least the minimum required RF frequency to operate efficiently. So, for instance, there's certain, I don't want to say moving pieces, but they're similar to moving pieces, whereas the cable is completely stationary. I have a building that I'm working with in San Jose, California right now, and one of the parts of these systems is they have to have a battery backup system that will keep it running even if the electricity goes out. That went out. They were notified immediately that the batteries had gone out and had to be replaced. So I'm assisting them now getting the new batteries. Once the new batteries go in, anytime you touch these systems at all, you have to complete that test afterwards. So we'll assist them get the new batteries put in, and then we'll go through and do what we call a grid test, where we're going to check the RF frequency to ensure that it's working throughout the entire building. But to your point, that test is only done once a year. There are certain things that will alert us that it's time to do the test. For instance, the battery's going out in this scenario. But what I think you're describing is maybe a device that can monitor that, the grid throughout the entire year as a minute-to-minute basis versus just once in a while, once in a year when you do work on the project or when you need to complete the requirements for the local AHJ.
No, I think that, yeah, working in the industry, they have a lot of checks and balances. But I do like the idea, just like, you got to get your roof replaced every 10 or based on what kind of shingles you bought, every 10, 30 years. So that's something to think about. I mean, I do a lot of that. Actually, in the telecom industry, we had to do that. A lot of check and balances. But
Scott, also we can remove that barrier where that 1 year is a little longer, and also that is manually. So if we create some kind of innovative technology out of it, and if you get the data regularly, it would be beneficial for you and for the users as well. And also now everything is online. If you have seen the latest OS, released by Apple, they are operating all those electricals and lighting through their mobile phone. So why not we manage those people as well? Because it's high time, and when we can do it, we have those technologies. It's just a matter of time, and maybe make sure that it won't. It won't affect some kind of natural calamities or maybe a fire or things like that, and we can save that fire thing maybe, or it's time to repair or maybe whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of data which we can generate, and we can plan a lot of things out of it as well, basically.
So I think to encapsulate that, because right now, as Scott was saying, if the battery backup fails, there's an alert that gets sent, but it gets sent to a fire panel, and then there's a dry contact, and somebody gets alerted, but it's not really all done on your phone, and to bring that into the next generation, the complete monitoring of the system on the phone that anyone can look at, building owners, the integrators. That's a fantastic idea.
Fire.
anything.
I'm so glad that you guys invited us here. This is great.
Well,
I had to build
I tell people we do this all the time. We get doctors who they come back every week to talk to other doctors on our panels, and we solve. I'm not going to say we solve the world's problems, but we're not here to complain or anything. But we make a lot of connections too. But one of the, that kind of system is good because to be able to keep up with it. One of the things that I had created with my patent was the ability to take any building plan, right? Any of your construction building plans, and the fire department can pull it up, and immediately our testing system goes into that building plan, and we will know exactly where a fire op man is in the building anywhere, just based off of the current plans that we get from City Hall. So there are things like that where you can integrate it and use it between other departments, right? Like he said, the fire department can have access to it, the building commissioners. But something else I want to share with you, one of the things I learned in developing the first fiber networks is if you start setting some of the standards that nobody's ever heard of, then you own it. Like, people have to follow you, right? And that's what you want, because now they have to catch up to you. And it's better to be defining these standards than it is to have to follow them. So, you're in a good position. Real quick, how much can you manufacture at a time?
We can probably put out at this moment roughly 100,000 feet in a month. Well, it might take a month to actually produce it, but there's materials that, raw materials that we have to procure. And the lead time, if we had to start from today, would probably be 6 to 8 weeks. But once we're up and running and have all the raw materials in-house, it's probably about 4 weeks for 100,000 feet or so.
Is that just one manufacturing facility? Where is that located?
Yes. It's on the East Coast. There's kind of two manufacturing facilities, because it's a two-step process as far as building this cable, injecting the materials that fireproof it, injecting the materials that keep it plenum rated. So it's a two-step process now, and it was very difficult cable to make. So it's not difficult, not only difficult to engineer, but it's not that easy to make as well, manufacture.
No, I gather that I worked with a company many years ago as a consultant called ETR, and they did a lot of different things for the telecom industry. One of them was putting connectors on the end of cables. They would get special orders of special links they needed, and it just made people's jobs easier. So it's mostly on the East Coast, you said?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we have two facilities. One facility that makes part of the cable goes to the other facility, and then they finish it up.
But nothing's stopping you when you get more orders, opening up more manufacturing facilities, correct?
No.
Or maybe taking this to other countries and training them how to do this and manufacture in their own country. To own the manufacturing facilities there. This is a great opportunity. I'm excited. I'm so glad that we finally get to meet. Wow, thank you, Scott.
I'd like to say a couple of things about. I'm really proud of what you guys are doing, because I think it's meeting a real need that's out there. And I wanted to shout out the cables in general, because when my wireless phone goes down, it's not because the sky went down. It's because the cable is not working. And also, I wanted to say that while you were getting your certification, you guys not only innovating in the cable market, but you're also innovating in testing, because you had to go out and innovate to get yourself certified. So I just have to tip my hat to you guys. You're doing a great job. You're really,
it's exciting.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Quick
question. Are you guys doing anything with cruise ships? Cruise boats.
I would assume that the cruise ships would have individually their own AHJ, but from what I understand about cruise ships, they are not typically incorporated in America. And I think that's part of the process for why when you get on a cruise ship, you have to go out to international waters, touch down in a different country.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what their AHJ regulations are for each individual cruise ship. If it were a cruise ship that was docked permanently in, say, San Francisco Harbor, they would definitely be required to have one of these systems because it is of the size that would be required for a structure and requiring the communication for life-saving.
Yep.
Well, and also, I hope that next time you guys come on, that you can bring Will with you, because I love to meet a person named Will Rogers.
I know 2 Will Rogers.
Yeah,
Wow.
good for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're both younger than me, so they don't really, they say danger, Will Rogers, danger. They just don't get it.
Don't get it?
Yeah.
Go watch some real TV back from the
That's David
70s.
Will Robinson.
Tell me about it.
Before we sign up,
my hero.
I would like to know what's your tagline for American Firewire.
American Firewire.
American Firewire.
What's the tagline?
Do you have a
Yeah,
tagline, a spinoff?
Protecting the America's first responders.
Yes, I love it. Protecting the America's first responders. That's beautiful. That's
So-
Maybe you can have one more tagline which says "Wiring the world."
What's
Yes.
that?
Say that again, man, kid.
Because I, as an entrepreneur, I think about it as a global citizen, and it should not be for a particular country, but maybe for the world, and that should what I always focus on, and that should be the tagline for you: wiring the world.
Yeah. So Ankit this is what I love working with him and the board. This global board has been together for a long time now, because before we started IBM TV itself, and it's all about the global answers and solutions. You know, not what we can do just in the United States, but how can we share this? And this has been a wonderful journey working with Ankit, because he comes up with all these great ideas, and Willie and Jim has just joined us. Actually, Jim is new, but I love his questions because he makes me realize so many people don't understand the bottom line of technology that we have to deploy. So, and that's what's healthy about this Wednesday is we talk a lot of technology on Wednesdays. So
Absolutely. Well, hey, we can't be happier that you invited us on. This wasn't sure what to really expect, but this far exceeded any expectations that I had.
wow,
Wonderful
thank
conversation.
You. Thank you.
And I hope that I think I have everyone's contact information.
Absolutely, you'll get it. Ankit will make sure you get it. I think that this is something that we could definitely make connections for you around the world, because this is a solution for the world. It's not just for the United States, and on a bigger scale. And there are some people I work with, actually. I know of some firemen in the California area, and one of them is knows investors that might be interested in this kind of product. So we'll spread the word.
I appreciate that very much. And I'm glad our attorney, Scott, got in touch with you.
I know, right? Yeah. Scott, you just been promoted. Without a lot of great, but you know what? I'm going to tell you that Nick, who is our attorney, as well as our senior executive producer and founder of IBM TV, he will tell you that there are some places in this country that you can still get your law license without having a law degree. So, so I might go get it.
From what I understand, you have to be sponsored by somebody who's bar accredited.
No, you just have to pass the test.
Oh, wow. Maybe I'll take it.
I think New York is still one of the states. South Carolina might still be too, because I remember somebody told me I should go down to South Carolina and get my my license to practice law, because they did at the time did not require a law degree. But eventually all of the states started to adapt that stupid law. But Nick goes, not stupid. It's just, it prevents everybody from going to get a law degree, but or a law license. But anyway, I'm so glad that we made that connection, and because you kind of brought me back to my roots, which is telecom. and it's always fun to have that conversation for me. Nick knows how much I love that world, so maybe we can make some. I would love to introduce you to.
I've been directing backstage and heard the question.
I know.
So here's the answer, counselor. For Washington State, Vermont, California, and Virginia are the 4 states that allow this process. Wyoming, New York, Maine allow lawyers to practice without earning a JD degree, although they must have some law school experience.
Thank you.
It's right on Wikipedia. So the thing is, for those who are interested in challenging the bar, you go to Wyoming, New York, and Maine. And then if you look at the loophole, what you do is you get reciprocity if they allow reciprocity into other states. Not that I would look at loopholes and regulations, but hey, look, somebody has to do it.
So Nick, what do you think of FireWire? I mean, this is pretty cool product.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's a great idea, but I agree with Ankit. You got to go global. In other words, Vivian is waiting down behind the scene, in Chengdu, China, and Chengdu is a city that we don't know much about, but it's a city in China that has 16 million people. Okay, so we're going to do a special on Chengdu, China. India has 1.3 billion people, and the United States of America has 300 million. But we don't know about all these other countries out there, right, mate? Yeah. And Australia has 24 million. And so the thing is to go global with a product like that.
Sure.
I mean, you can do it because it's international. The only thing I see, I was like checking the pricing models, and I know a lot of business owners are cheap. So if they're a Starbucks, they go, well, I don't care if it burns down and they don't get the wire. Seriously, I wouldn't care. But if you're a Cisco Systems or a Delta Airlines
data center,
okay, or you, in the industry I'm in, running an actuarial firm all over the country, yeah, we do care because that destroys our business. So certain companies have to have it, but others don't. Okay.
Nick, I'll tell you, I have an interesting scenario happening where the exact same thing that you're describing happened, where the building said, this is something that we're never going to use. It's only used by police and fire, SWAT, all those guys. And they tried to skate around it during the building phase. The fire marshal has since come in, put a lock on the front door, and said, anybody that tries to enter this premise prior to getting this system installed will be arrested. So
that depends what country you're in. Okay, the fire marshal in Nigeria may not give a rat's rear. You see what I mean? Okay, but Cisco Systems in Nigeria doesn't care. So it really depends on what country you're in and what business they're in that makes a difference. Like I said, some of the companies here in North Carolina, SAS Systems, SAS can't afford to go down. Okay, I mean, you know, for 2 hours, it would kill their whole business. But then if they're at Starbucks down the streets, what do they care? But the U.S. may have regulations. You go to India, they may go, hey, Starbucks in India, if it burns up, because the pricing model of 150, 55, and 500, you know, you're talking about big spreads.
But Philadelphia goes down.
I think it's time to
yeah, we can talk about the pricing model later.
But what I want to mention to these guys is you can change those things. But what's great about IBM TV is we have viewers all over the world.
Right.
So we're not just here. So what we're sharing goes all over the world. China is come on board, and we are sharing all of this great, you know, hey, you guys need to try this as well. We're not giving them our technology. They have to buy it. And and that's what I stand on my ground. We can share this technology.
And China is up now. We're going into Chengdu.
Everyone, meet Vivian from
Vivian from Chengdu, China.
Bye.
Okay. Vivian, we're looking forward to your special on Chengdu. Vivian, can you hear us?
Vivian.
Oh, better get this mic working. See, this is the problem with technology. It's got to work.
Can you hear us now?
Vivian, can you hear us?
IBM
there's technology.
And she's been working. She helps us communicate and get our information into China, as well as open doors around the world with us. And she's doing a special on her part of the country, because Nick has never heard of the country, right?
Well, one of the problems you have in media is actually getting through some of their firewalls into their countries. So like in StreamYard, Alexander Starr's backstage, but he's from Russia. And we bring a lot of Russian people into our programming, but they have to fill out all this paperwork before they can actually listen to our show. So as you go to different countries, there's different protocols to get in. And the paperwork is like this thick just to get on StreamYard. So, Vivian, can you hear us?
Yeah. Now I can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay. So, are you ready for your special on Chengdu?
Yeah.
Okay.